We'll go through the characteristics of MSK structures. We'll also show you some pathologies. We'll go into the artifacts which we see in MSK ultrasound, and a small thing on the advancements in ultrasound in MSK. So coming to the introduction, the mode of application of ultrasound in MSK system was published in 1972, where the diagnostic potential of ultrasound was used to differentiate a Baker's cyst from thrombophlebitis. MSK ultrasound is a rapidly evolving technique that's gaining popularity for the evaluation and treatment of joint and soft tissue diseases. It is widely accepted and available tool in Europe and other parts of the world where
sir,
it is
sorry
performed.
to interrupt you, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, your
Yes.
voice is actually cracking. Is there any mic or like you are talking with any phone or something?
No, nothing.
Actually, some like vibrations are coming.
Okay, just one. Hold on.
Yes.
Okay, can I start?
Yeah, you can start. Now it's a bit fine, sir.
Okay, so it is widely accepted and available tool in Europe and other parts of the world where it is performed for many clinical indications. Now, the problem here is that many physicians, including radiologists, are often unaware of the potential application ultrasound is mandatory. Linear transducers are ideal for MSK since most of the structures are elongated or oval. It is the workhorse of MSK. The frequency ranges for the linear transducer ranges from 15 megahertz, and now we have transducers which are more than 20 megahertz. There's the hockey stick probe, which can be used for smaller structures in hands. For observations, a curvy linear transducer is used with the range of 3 to 5 megahertz. You can use extended field of view, or what is known as the panoramic. This can demonstrate the entire extent of a structure being examined, as you see in this image. Which are necessary when one has to compare the structure with contralateral normal side. This is one advantage in MSK ultrasound. You can always compare with the opposite normal side. Now, the only problem is when both the sides are abnormal. Color and power Doppler are often now accepted as part of the protocol evaluation. Now it's used extensively in arthritis. Dynamic imaging can readily reveal certain transient conditions which can be absent during static examinations. For example, you can diagnose snapping symptoms using this dynamic imaging. Now, coming to the limitations, one dependency, the quality and resolution detailed image of a very relatively small area. Because of the limited penetration, there is lower resolution at greater depths. To penetrate bone. So anything, and of course, higher machines can be expensive, while cheaper ones, the quality can be variable. Now let's go through the normal appearance of tendons. This is the most common clinical condition for musculoskeletal ultrasound, where the tendon is in the shoulder, and the ultrasound appearance of the tendon is fairly uniform. Ultrasound showing the
Sorry.
parallel hyperechoic of the tendon.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you, sir. Matthew, sir.
Yes.
Sir, your voice is continuously
Yes,
breaking, sir.
tell me.
Sir, your voice is continuously breaking, sir. Is there any problem like network or like something?
Actually, that was okay.
Sorry?
I don't have any problem. No problems with the net.
I don't know why, but it is like regularly breaking, sir. So let's start. Hello.
I'm getting interruptions in between, like that. In
Okay,
between,
sir.
somebody is on the mic, or it's
Yeah,
not from my side.
Can you please all disable your mic? Actually, like voice is breaking. Okay, sir, let's start, sir. Let's see.
Okay. So, so on the longitudinal axis, on the longitudinal section, you can see it as a fibrillary pattern, while on the transverse section, it is seen as what is known as a brush or broom end pattern. So, but there are some exceptions, like in the shoulder, in the subscapularis muscle, a tendon, when you do a transverse section, sometimes you can see alternating hyper and hypoechoic lines. Now, these hypoechoic lines are because of muscle fascicles between hyperechoic tendon fibers. Now, let's go into some. Now, tendinopathy, when the its normal fibrillary pattern and becomes hypoechoic or heterogeneous or even thickened, we call it as tendinopathy. Now, this is a case where of the supraspinatus, where you can see that the supraspinatus has lost its normal echogenicity. It's quite heterogeneous, it's thickened, and incidentally, there's even a partial tear, intrasubstance partial tear. And this was again another case where the supraspinatus is very heterogeneous and thickened, and this is a case of tendinopathy. Now, this patient presented with pain in the anterior ankle, and when we did the ultrasound, we saw that the patellar tendon was thickened and hypoechoic, with a focal hypoechoic area near the patellar bone. So on color Doppler, we could see that there was increased vascularity. So this was again a case of patellar tendinosis. Now, tears can be partial, full thickness, or complete. Now, how do we know that there is a tear? When there is a disruption of the the fibers of the tendons, then that is when we call it as a tear. Now, this is a case of a partial tear involving the supraspinatus articular surface. You can see fibers are disrupted in this area, in the near the articular surface. But this tear does not extend all the way up to the bursal surface. So this was a partial tear of the supraspinatus near its insertion on the greater tuberosity. And when you do the transverse view, you can see again the tear which does not extend all the way up to the bursal surface. Now, this is a case of full thickness tear where there is disruption of the tendon from the articular to the bursal surface, and the gap is actually filled with fluid. So this was on the longitudinal section. Same on the transverse, you can see the fluid is filling up the gap. So this was a full thickness tear. And this patient went on to do an MRI, which again showed the full thickness tear of the supraspinatus with fluid between in the gap. Now, when there is full thickness tear with complete retraction, there is called a complete tear. And what happens is, in this, if you look, you cannot see the normal fibers of the supraspinatus, but you can see that the deltoid muscle is seen flushed against the greater tuberosity. This patient also went for a MRI, and you could see that the normal fibers were not seen, and the tendon was retracted. So this is again a case of a complete tear with retraction of the tendon. Sometimes you can see calcification within the tendon, and these calcifications are seen as hyperechoic foci, and sometimes they may or may not show posterior acoustic shadowing. So this is a case where there was no major posterior acoustic shadowing, which is in reference to a soft calcification, while here you can see there was a hyperechoic mass giving posterior acoustic shadowing. So this is another case of calcific tendinosis. One advantage of ultrasound is you can do dynamic studies. And here, this is ultrasound of the shoulder. You can see the greater tuberosity and the lesser tuberosity and the bicipital. When we did the ultrasound, we did not see the bicipital. It was seeing over the lateral tuberosity. So this is a case of tendon subluxation, and when we did the dynamic, we saw that the tendon displaced deep to the subscapularis tendon because of a tear. So there was tear of the subscapularis tendon. Tendons can be of two types: those with tendon sheath and those without the tendon sheath. Now, this biceps tendon has a tendon sheath, and in this, you can see that the hypoechoic area around the tendon is the sheath, and this is really thickened, and there is some fluid also within the tendon, between the tendon sheath and the tendon. So this was a case of tenosynovitis. And here is another example. This was the ultrasound of the ankle, where you can see the normal peroneus longus tendon, and you can see a thickened and heterogeneous tendon sheath with fluid and internal debris. The patient was finally diagnosed to have tenosynovitis because of rheumatoid arthritis. This patient came for evaluation of a trigger finger, and when we did the ultrasound, what we saw was the patient had a thickened A1 pulley and thickened sheath also, and this was the cause of his trigger. Now, this patient came with interest over the radial cord, and we did the ultrasound. We could see that there was thickening of the tendon of the first extensor compartment, the adductor longus and the extensor pollicis brevis, and not only thickened, but there was also thickening of the tendon sheath with increased vascularity. So we just compared it with the other side, the normal right side, and you can see that's the normal size of the tendons, and this was on the affected side. So this was a case of de Quervain's tenosynovitis. This was a very interesting case because the patient came with pain in the anterior joint, and when we did anterior knee, and when we did the ultrasound, we saw this echogenic focus along the patella tendon with increased vascularity around it. So we thought it was tendinosis of the patella. So we gave that diagnosis. The patient came for MRI, which didn't reveal anything more than the diagnosis, but the patient was still symptomatic, and even after treatment. So he came for a CT. We did a dual CT, and we saw that the patella was filled with urate crystals. So the patient was finally diagnosed as to have gout. Now, one of the greatest advantage of ultrasound is the dynamic study we can do. So we can actually diagnose impingement. So this is the impingement test we did for this patient who came with restricted movements of the shoulder. And here what you can see is the greater tuberosity, and just above it is the subscapularis tendon, the supraspinatus tendon, and this is the acromion. So when we do the impingement test, we actually ask the patient to abduct his arm, and if the supraspinatus slides slides in smoothly deep to the acromion, it is normal. But in this patient, the supraspinatus buckled and was not going deep to the acromion process. So this was diagnosed case of subacromion impingement. Now, coming to the normal anatomy of the ligaments, they have an appearance similar to tendons. They have more compact fibrillar and hyperechoic pattern. All the ligaments except the medial collateral ligament of the knee are homogeneous and hyperechoic. So this is ultrasound of the anterior talofibular ligament. You can see the fibrillary pattern on the longitudinal section. And this is the medial collateral ligament of the knee on the transverse section, giving the brush or broom end appearance. So you can get tears of the ligaments also. This was a case where there was, you can see that this is the medial end of the knee. Disruption of the deep fibers of the medial collateral ligament, while the superficial the medial collateral ligament fibers were intact. And this is the axial transverse sections also showing the tear of the medial collateral ligament. This patient also went for an MRI, and this showed which showed the tear of the deep fibers of the medial collateral ligament with normal intact superficial fibers. This is a case of ATFL tear, where a patient with RTA, and you can see that was really hypoechoic and discontinuity in the ligament. So this was a case of ATFL tear. Now, coming to the normal appearance of muscles. Normal skeletal muscles show low to mid-level echogenicity with high planes. So on the option, you have this feather or vein on leaf pattern. And on the transverse, you have what is known as the starry night appearance. Tests can be diagnosed, and tears can be diagnosed on ultrasound. The degree of retraction, if any, can be measured. Dynamic imaging with contraction of the affected muscle can sometimes better illustrate the abnormality and provide functional image information. So this is a case of a tear of the medial head of gastrocnemius associated with the hematoma at the myotendinous junction. So this is also another case showing a tear of the medial of gastrocnemius with hematoma at the myotendinous junction. Okay, this patient came with history of swelling. Actually, he had a trauma. Patient came with swelling of the upper thigh. The ultrasound, we saw that there was this heterogeneous mass within the muscle, which showed areas which were hyper fine internal echoes, and there was absolutely no vascularity. So this was diagnosed. This was given vascular hematoma. Sometimes especially when we do dynamic studies. So this was a study. This was an ultrasound image of the anterior leg, where it shows normal muscle fibers and subcutaneous plane. But when the muscle was contracted, we see that part of the muscle through a visual defect. So this was a case of muscle hernia. This patient came to our department very recently. She had a young patient, young female, with the swelling of the arm for 2 months. When we did the ultrasound, it showed a lobulated mass in the muscle with lot of hyperechoic foci within because of calcification, and there was some vascularity within it. So we gave the possibility of sarcoma, and the patient came for MRI color, the contrast study. It was proven to be a sarcoma. Now, coming to the normal appearance of the nerves, the peripheral nerves can be accurately identified on ultrasound. Normal peripheral nerves typically appear as echogenic fascicular structures and tend to be slightly less echogenic than tendons or ligaments. So here we can see on the longitudinal section, the fascicular pattern of the nerve here. This is the median nerve. And on the transverse, it gives us what is known as the honeycomb pattern. So multiple hypoechoic the fascicles, which giving the honeycomb pattern. This patient came with swelling at the elbow joint, and when we did the ultrasound, we saw the nerve. It appeared to be weakened. We compared it with the normal side, which is the right side, and when we compared, we could definitely see that the nerve was really thickened and hypoechoic. So it was a case of peripheral neuropathy. Sometimes when we scan the cubital carpal tunnel, we tend to see this normal variant of the median nerve. This was a case of a bifid median nerve, and which was separated by the persistent median artery. So when we saw this, we just looked at the other side, the left wrist, and surprisingly, on that side also, the patient had a bifid median nerve. The carpal tunnel syndrome can be diagnosed on ultrasound, and anything we actually take the cross section and the area of the median nerve at the carpal tunnel, and anything more than 10 centimeters squared, 0.1 centimeter is abnormal. Coming to the normal appearance of bone, the bone cortex appears as an echogenic surface with posterior shadowing. Only the superficial surface of the bone can be consistently evaluated on ultrasound. So this is a case. So the echogenic line here, what we see is the cortex of the rib here, and here we can see a discontinuity. There's a step defect here, which is because of the fracture, and there is associated hematoma. So this the occult fractures can be detected on ultrasound, and it is superior to radiograph for detection of occult fractures. So another thing, bony erosions in rheumatoid arthritis, so can be detected using ultrasound, and it is seen even before that is on radiograph. This is the associated synovitis. Now, coming to the normal appearances of and labia, these are phylochondrial structures, and they contain more, and hence they are more hyperechoic. So this is the medial meniscus, this wedge shape or tri-shaped hyperechoic structure between the femur and the tibia, and this is again the glenoid labrum triangular structure, which is seen as hyperechoic. So these also can be diagnosed on ultrasound. This was a case when the patient came with pain on the medial aspect of knee, and we did the ultrasound, and on ultrasound we saw that there was this cystic structure in close relation to the medial meniscus, and we also saw that there was a hypoechoic line extending along the medial meniscus. So we gave it as a meniscal tear with a parameniscal cyst. So it was a chronic tear. The patient came for MRI, and which revealed the same findings. There was this small parameniscal cyst and with a horizontal tear along the body. Meniscal extrusions and again tear can be diagnosed on ultrasound. So when the medial meniscus protrudes or is displaced laterally for more than 3 mm, we call it as extrusion. Now, coming to the normal appearance of cartilage, it is a thin anechoic rim paralleling the echogenic cortical surface, which represents the hyaline cartilage. So this is the cartilage, the hypoechoic structure, in the trochlear groove of the knee, and one should not mistake this for effusion, because effusion also can look very anechoic or hypoechoic. So the most common, the cartilage in children can be easily assessed. So this is an ultrasound of the hip of an infant, and we can see the normal cartilage of the femoral head, which is within the acetabular groove. So this was done to check for developmental dysplasia, but this was a normal case where you can see the normal alpha angle, and more than half of the femoral head is within the acetabular groove. While this case, you can see that the alpha angle is really increased, and the femoral head is partially subluxed. Less than 50% is within the acetabular groove. So this was a case of developmental dysplasia of the hip. Now, coming to the bursa, these are sac-like structures with hyperechoic appearance. This usually does not exceed more than 2 mm in thickness. They are better defined on ultrasound when distended with fluid. So this is the subacromion subdeltoid bursa, which widely sometimes you don't see it because it's thickened because of bursitis. And here you can see the coracoid and the subscapularis muscle, and between the two we can see a fluid collection, which is fluid within the subcoracoid bursa due to bursitis. Now, coming to lumps and bumps. This was the case where the patient presented with mass swelling in the medial aspect of the elbow, and the patient had Tinel's positive sign. So when we did the ultrasound, we saw this ovoid, circumscribed ovoid shaped structure with central cystic areas, and this was in continuity with the ulnar nerve. So this was a case of peripheral nerve sheath tumor. This is another case, a patient who had above amputation, and the patient came for because of pain and for the evaluation, and we did the ultrasound. You could see the sciatic nerve there, and there was this hypoechoic mass, and so a case of stump fibromatosis, swelling and pain in the plantar aspect of the foot. So this patient had come with a similar clinical features of pain and swelling. And when we did the ultrasound, we could see this well circumscribed hyperechoic mass, which was in continuity with the plantar fascia. So, and a lot of times you can see some vascularity within it. And this was diagnosed as plantar fibromatosis. Sorry. Baker's cyst. These are fluid-filled, distended synovial line lesions arising in the popliteal fossa between the middle head of gastrocnemius and semitendinosus tendon. And usually there's a communication with the joint. So there's this Baker's cyst, and there's usually a small tail which communicates with the knee joint. Ganglion cyst. These are non-malignistic masses that occur in association with musculoskeletal structures. They may demonstrate septations within it with posterior or with acoustic enhancement. And these are the most common lumps you see in the wrist and hand. This was a dorsal ganglion near the wrist joint. You can see the cystic structure, and there was this tail which was going to the joint with some septations and internal echoes. So this was, and this related to the tendon structures and joint. So the case of ganglion cyst. Now, coming to some artifacts which we will see in MSK ultrasound. Now, the first one is anisotrophy. So this is very peculiar to MSK studies, and it is usually seen in tendons and ligaments. The ultrasound beam, this is commonly seen when the ultrasound beam is oblique and not perpendicular to the structure of interest. An echogenic structure, like a tendon of the ligament, may appear spuriously hyperechoic, giving the false impression of an abnormality. So when the beam is perpendicular to the structure, it's seen as normal hyperechoic. But if the structure is oblique, or the beam does not reflect back to the transducer, and this gives a false impression, a hyperechoic area, which we may think as pathological. Now, how to overcome this is by manipulating the probe. You just tilt the probe and and make the probe parallel to the structure, and which will eliminate the artifact. So I'll show you some examples. This is an ultrasound of the bicipital groove. So the reciprocity, the gradient reciprocity in the bicipital groove. When you scan this, you see that there's a void, hypoechoic area within the bicipital groove. So the first thing is that we might think is that it's a tear of the biceps tendon. But just by tilting the probe, you can see that suddenly you can see the hyperechoic fibulary, the pattern of the biceps tendon appearing. So this is a case where an example of anisotrophy. This is another example. This is at the wrist. You see multiple hyperechoic structures, and when we tilt the probe, we tend to see the normal, the pattern of the tendons. So one must be very careful to report these as pathology. Always tilt the probe to see that you are not missing the normal structures, calling normal structures as pathological. So these anisotropy can be more easily seen on a curvilinear probe, especially in the lateral parts of the image. This is again another example. It can be used for our advantage, the anisotrophy. So this is actually an ultrasound of the finger, the flexor tendon. Sorry. Tendons. You just have to the probe and you can see the different tendons. So that was the tendon slips, and that's of the superficial flexor tendon, and that's the flexor profunda in the center. So you can actually use it to see the different structures also by using anisotropy. Now coming to the other artifacts, these are common to other ultrasounds also. So you can see posterior acoustic shadowing because of calcifications. That's one example. That's a calcification within the posterior acoustic shadowing. You can get posterior acoustic enhancement, especially when you're doing ultrasound of the cystic structures. The posterior aspect will be enhanced, will become more hyperechoic, and posterior reverberation artifacts. When the ultrasound beams encounter two strong parallel reflectors which are closely placed, like that of a needle, as we see here, you tend to see multiple linear hyperechoic lines below it. So this is what is known as a posterior artifact. And the other artifact is the shadow, what's known as the edge artifact. So right at the edges, you can see hyperechoic shadowing. This is because of the obliquity of the beam. So these can be eliminated by using by making the probe perpendicular to the structure you are evaluating. Now coming to the application, how does ultrasound go over MRI, or the MRI over the ultrasound? Compared to ultrasound, MRI offers more comprehensive evaluation of intra-articular structures and better evaluation of the bone marrow and also the deep soft structures. While when an ultrasound has higher resolution, so it is much better to evaluate the peripheral nerves in the extremities. And ultrasound can evaluate foreign body as small as 0.5 millimeters. It can identify complications such as septic tenosynovitis and abscesses, and can be used to mark the skin, assisting surgical removal of the foreign bodies. You can better evaluate the and implants, while in MR, they get a lot of artifacts because of the implants. And the greatest advantage of ultrasound is the dynamic study, especially for the tendons and nerves. Look for dislocation, snapping hip syndromes, tears, and hernias. Now, coming to a short word on recent advances. Ultrasound, 3D ultrasounds. The primary feature of 3D ultrasound is the ability to reconstruct volumetric data in place, providing in-depth anatomical detail to better evaluate soft tissues, muscles, and tendons, as well as improve guidance for ultrasound procedures. And this is one example of it. Second one is ultrasound. Gas microbubbles are injected can allow for precise assessment of vascularity by monitoring the flow and spread of the bubbles. Several studies have demonstrated that ultrasound has a higher sensitivity than powered Doppler to monitor rheumatoid arthritis, active synovitis, and assess soft tissue masses. They can also be used to assess the vascularity of repaired rotator cuff tendons. Fusion of ultrasound imaging with CT or MR data. These are used by using special equipment and softwares, and these can assist in guiding biopsy needles. Now, one emerging modality to show the elastic property of tissue is called elastography. Studies have demonstrated that elastography can differentiate between the stiffer, healthy tendons and softer, symptomatic patients with tendinopathies with excellent diagnostic accuracy. It is also employed to monitor treatment and training protocols in athletes and tendinopathies. Finally, ultrasounded percutaneous procedures. These are minimally invasive and associated with lower risk of infection, decreased pain with having faster healing, and return to activities compared to surgical approaches. Injections and aspirations are now commonly done with ultrasound guidance. So I've come to the last slide. So in this, I've actually just given you a brief account, actually an introduction to MSK ultrasound, and it's not complete. What I have said is just a gist of what is being done. But the current applications of MSK ultrasound is in clinical practice are broad and will continue to expand as ultrasound technology is rapidly improving. And improvement in the equipment is likely to play an increasing role. Thorough knowledge of the anatomy and meticulous technique are essential requirements for a successful examination. With more experience, one can make the modality even more effective. So thank you, and these are my references.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for this interesting presentation. There were some network might be like some kind of issues, so we were not able to hear voice clearly. But it was really very amazing presentation. If there is any questions or any clarification with all these presentation, then you can simply put here on Q&A box, and we will answer you the same. Sir, there is one question, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. Please discuss how to diagnose vascular malformations.
Yeah. For vascular malformations, we have to use Doppler, color Doppler. So vascular malformations can be venous, arterial, or even arteriovenous fistulas. So basically what we require is the color Doppler, and if, for example, venolymphatic malformations. These are usually very soft, compressible, and a lot of times we might not be able to see color flow within it because of the slow flow. But when you have an arterial like aneurysms or pseudoaneurysms, you can actually see the blood movement, the flow with it. So if you have a pseudoaneurysm, you can see what is known as the yo-yo effect, the turbulent flow within the aneurysms, pseudoaneurysms. And the other thing is, and you'll get the arterial spectral pattern. These are, and usually you will have the you can see the serpiginous vessels when you in vascular malformations.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for answer. Hope Varsha ma'am, you satisfied with the answer. If you have any more clarification, you can simply put it on a Q&A tab. Otherwise, you can raise your hand and I will unmute your audio and you can see directly ask to Dr. Matthew. Is there any question? Okay. I think we need to start our next step of today's session. So hope you enjoyed the first session delivered by Dr. Matthew, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. And let's kick start and step forward to our next session. And the next session will be a commercial presentation of BPL Medical Technology. The session will be delivered by Ms. Priti Vimal. She is a National Product Manager for Ultrasound in BPL Medical Technology, and she is mainly looking for high-end range of products and having an experience of 14 years with multiple companies in medical space. So I'm just making presenter to Priti ma'am, and
yes,
yeah, I'm just making can be accepted and started. And can we accept this? Accept and yeah, now I'm able to see your screen, ma'am.
okay. Thank you, Dr. Jitender and Ultrasound Innovators to 2020. So, yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, whole team of Microbios and Ultrasound Innovators, for giving us an opportunity to present in this platform. So, myself, as Preeti Vimal, as a representative of BPL Medical, would be taking few minutes to talk about our company and product portfolio. So, BPL Medical Technology has started its journey in 1967 with the launch of single channel ECG machine, and in the subsequent years launched many medical products. In the year of 2014, they have collaborated with the Alpinian Medical for the ultrasound product range, and then again has been through many other medical equipments. So BPL as a company has around 600 plus feet on ground, and they have a very strong service support and channel partners. And they have their own manufacturing unit also, which comprises around 120 employees based in Palakkad. These are the few installations what we have across India. So like the hospitals like Metro, Max, and these are some of our big installation. So for the ultrasounds, the BPL Medical, they have collaborated with a company called Alpinian Medical Systems, which is a South Korean company, and they are they have a dedicated ultrasound company because they are only manufacturing ultrasound, and they are also manufacturing very high-end systems, which is HIFU system, ultrasound guided HIFU system, and they have been manufacturing their own probes. So they are not depending upon any third party. It's just they are having a whole unit they are manufacturing within the same premises itself. And they are the first company who has manufactured single crystal technology in the affordable system. So prior to Alpinian, the single crystal technology was only available in the high-end technology, but Alpinian brought this technology in the affordable system like eCube 7 and product. So, and they are the only company as of now, they are not who has been manufacturing single crystal volume probes. This is the entire product basket for BPL Medical. And starting from the EQ5, which is our entry model machine, then we have a eCube i7, which is a portable unit. And this is the eCube 8 series. This is a mid-range segment, eCube 8 LE, 8 and 8 Diamond. And then we have a high-end series, eCube 12 and 15. So all machines, they are into the shared services, which caters radiology, cardiology, OBGYN. So they are the really nice products. And then this machine is based on a FlexScan architecture. So the main advantage of having this architecture is like whatever images you are getting today will be there for the year of after the years also. So it ensures that a stable image performance throughout the ultrasound life. So that's the strength of this platform. And then this machine is based on the SSD solid state drive. So as a result, you will get a fast boot up time, and like your laptop, you can do multiple functions also. Like when you are transferring data, that time also you can scan the patient. So that's because the machine processing power it's really good. Then in terms of transducer technology, the Selpinion products they are really good in terms of the transducer technology what they are giving, even in the mid-range segment. So this crystal signature or single crystal technology, these are generally available in the high-end systems, but we are giving this technology even in the mid-range segment. So this basically gives a very nice penetration where you can have a very high definition images and a higher penetration images. And also it has a very high performance transducer. There is one more technology called a power view technology, where it has a backing block which continuously lowers down the heat, and as a result it adds lots of life to your probe, the stability and durability to the transducer, and the image quality will remain intact even after the years as well. So this is the technology what Alpinian products they have been using in all across the product line. So they it's as a result lightweighted flexible cables. So this kind of flexible cable is there. Otherwise there will be a wear and tear. But we are using a flexible cable, low loss cable with curved footprint and micro pinless connectors. So there are no pins in it. So it is there from the entry level to the high end equipments. Then this is the sensitive view technology what they have been using across models across all transducers. So whatever information you are collecting it gets amplified on the probe side, then traveling to the low loss cable, and again it gets amplified, and therefore the images which you are getting onto the monitor, the purified signals enhance sensitivity and high resolution images. So even in the mid-range segment, you are getting a really nice 3D and 4D features. So this is normal 3D and the features like Live HQ, which gives you a really fetoscopy kind of imaging. So these are the images which we have taken from the mid-end segment. And then the multi-slicing, so you can do multiple post-processing and all in the stored images. Nice color pickup is also there. So just wanted to share that small video. This is a product of eCube 12 what we have. eCube 12, this is our high-end system. It's really powerful in terms of performance, workflow. So it has a 4 light probe connectivity, and the image quality is really good because it supports both single crystal technology and power view technology. All advanced features, speckle reduction imaging, SRI is available. Then X-speed imaging, auto optimization along with the trace sensitivity. So single crystal transducers are there. Then it has a power view transducer, so I have a wide range of transducer with this machine. Then the workflow is really simple. You'll get a many user defined keys where you can assign it for the multiple functions. Then 21 inches full HD LED monitor, which gives you a really nice imaging, and then 10.4 inches of customizable touch screen. So these are the knobs which you can assign it to make your workflow simple. 4 live probe connectivity, these are HD connector and micro pinless. Machine is based on SSD, so the processing will be very fast. Machine reaction time is less. Then easy to use keyboard is there. Then it has a gel warmer, that to 3-step gel warmer. So according to the weather, you can adjust. Uh, so overall, the features what this machine has auto IMT feature. the directional power Doppler imaging. Then it has cardiac features also there, cube strain. Then it has stress echo. So as I told, like these are the shared services. The same machine can be used for multiple applications. So needle vision to correct the artifacts and all, and then elastography, auto NT. Here precision is the best. Like you need not to manually take these measurements. In one go, you'll get an accurate one. Then it has a package of 3D, 4D volume advanced, live HQ, which is a fetoscopy kind of imaging. So overall, you will get a very good image quality workflow with the machine itself. So machine is very user friendly. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you so much. I hope it is helpful. Please
Thank
do
you.
contact us for any. Thank you.
Thank you so
Dr.
much for this amazing product range descriptions of BPL Medical Technology, and really it looks very good. And request you all, if you have any query or clarification regarding any step of this presentation, you can simply put here on Q&A box. And more than that, you will get a complete catalog link after the session in the thank you mail. You can simply go through that platform and write to BPL Medical Technology for any product related clarification. If you have any questions or clarification, you can simply ask here or raise your hand to direct interact with Preeti. Is there any question? Yeah. Thank you so much, Nirmal sir, for this question. Price range of machines. He is asking for price range of machine.
So we have a price range like which is starting from a 10 lakhs to around 50 lakhs machines we have.
Thank you. Thanks for answer, ma'am. Thank you so much, Nirmal sir, for asking question. And as per your clarification, you will get a mail from BPL Medical Technology for different price range of equipments, and you can simply go there, and for there is a multiple video of product available on YouTube. You can simply check it out there. Even more, as you will get a thank you mail of BPL link. Is there any more question? Thank you so much. Thank you, Nirmal sir, for asking question. Is there any question? You can simply ask here. Otherwise, you can mail it on BPL email ID, and we'll share it with you after the session. So let's kick start our next step of session. Anusha ma'am, are you there? Ma'am, I'm audible to you. Ma'am, I'm audible. Yeah, ma'am, simply accept that like command of screen sharing and start it, ma'am.
Command vannോ Lilo. Hello.
Ma'am, are you there? Yes, ma'am, I'm audible to you.
I have not got the command.
Yeah, I already share. You are showing here like presenter, ma'am. Just simply click on that sharing button.
Okay.
So thank you guys for your patience for being here. As we started from our first session, and then we go for like BPL Medical Technology presentation, and now the session, the next step, the session is mainly on breast imaging. It's delivered by Dr. Anusha Varghese. He's a senior consultant and HOD Department of Radiology and Imaging, Lord's Hospital, Kochi. So let's kick start to our next session. Over to you, Dr. Anusha, ma'am.
Hello.
You can start. Ma'am,
Good
I'm
afternoon,
audible.
everybody. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. You're audible.
Yeah. You can start now, ma'am. You can start sharing.
Okay.
Just click on start sharing button and start it.
Okay. Can you see my screen? I've shared the screen.
No, not yet, ma'am. Just select that entire screen option and click on below highlighted share button as you did yesterday.
Jitin,
Ma'am, click on that start sharing button first, then select entire screen option, and then click below to highlighted share button. Yeah, now I'm able to see your screen. Can you please make it on full screen mode, so ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah, now you can start, ma'am. Thank you so much. Started.
Good afternoon, everybody. My talk today is about breast ultrasound, a few of the basics and a spectrum of cases. I'm Dr. Anusha from Department of Radiology in Lourdes Hospital at Kochi in Kerala. What is the importance of ultrasound when MRI of the breast and mammography are becoming more readily available day by day? Ultrasound is so widely available and cheap. It is harmless. It is handled by radiologists, sonologists, and sonographers. Public is accustomed to the ultrasound scan, and they are not hesitant to be subjected to it. And any number of times also, they will be ready to undergo the ultrasound examination. Practical points. You have to have a standard Doppler machine. The linear probe with a dedicated breast preset is to be preferred. You sit with your application specialist and form a dedicated preset for that. Adjust the depth and penetration. Focal point is to be brought to the level of interest for maximum information. Brightness is to be optimized. If large breasts, then turn the patient so that the lesion is closer to the probe. Watch for mobility of secretion, pus or milk, which occurs within a cystic cavity abscess or within the ducts. A water bath is to be used judiciously. This is also called the standoff pad. This illustrates the example of using the focal point. In the first image, you can see the focal point is far anterior, so the anterior borders of the lesion are very clearly seen. In the second image, the focal point is at the back of the lesion, so the posterior borders are very clearly seen. On the image on the right, you can see multiple focal points, thereby anterior and posterior borders are clearly outlined. Advantages of the ultrasound. Dense breast on mammography will obscure any opacity that could be a pathological lesion. So ultrasound is very advantageous in dense breasts. Areas which are not included on mammography, including the parasternal, infraclavicular, inframammary, and infraaxillary regions, are well assessed by ultrasound. Definite criteria for differentiation between benign and malignant lesions are outlined by the ACR-BIRADS ultrasound lexicon. Doppler and elastography are useful tools in the armamentarium of the radiologist. Cyst identification. Once an opacity seen by other modalities is confirmed to be a clear cyst on ultrasound, the search ends there. It can be classified as BIRADS category 2 and therefore definitely left alone with 0% of risk of malignancy. Implants and their problems are well visualized on ultrasound. Guided interventions of various natures can be done. This is dealt with at the end of the presentation. Pregnancy and lactation, which forms a very vulnerable group with multiple breast pathologies, can be well assessed by ultrasound without subjecting them to radiation of the mammogram. The ACR-BIRADS 5th edition, the ultrasound lexicon, is dealt with here. ACR, American College of Radiology, outlined certain definite descriptor terms and standardized the imaging of the breast. It was first done in 2003. Subsequently, various new editions came out. The 5th edition is the last and the most recent one. The tissue composition can be divided into A, B, and C types: homogeneous fat, or homogeneous fibroglandular, and heterogeneous background echo pattern. Masses have different characteristics which have to be described according to these terms. The shape can be described as oval, round, or irregular. Orientation will be parallel or not parallel to the skin. Margins, if circumscribed, you write circumscribed. If not circumscribed, you have to use one of these descriptive terms: indistinct, angular, microlobulated, or spiculated. Echo pattern is described as anechoic, hyperechoic, complex cystic solid, hypoechoic, isoechoic, and or heterogeneous. Other features include the posterior features, which is classified as no posterior features for the lesion, or enhancement, posterior shadowing, or a combined pattern. Calcification can be within the mass, outside the mass, or intraductal calcifications. Associated features include architectural distortion, duct changes, skin changes which include thickening and retraction, edema, vascularity which could be absent, internal vascularity present, or vessels only in the rim of the lesion. Elastography is used and the elasticity is classified as soft, intermediate, or hard. With all these descriptors, we arrive at category of the breast lesion. It can range from 0 to 6. 0 does need additional imaging. 1 is negative, essentially 0% risk. B2 is benign, again 0% risk. 3 is probably benign, which requires short interval follow-up of 6 months and 0 to 2% risk of malignancy. 4 is suspicious tissue diagnosis, A, B, or C. Attended. A is low suspicion of malignancy, 2 to 10%. B is moderate suspicion of malignancy, 10 to 50%. C is high suspicion of malignancy, 50 to 95%, so a high risk of malignancy. 5 is highly suggestive of malignancy with tissue diagnosis warranted, more than 95% risk. 6 is known biopsy proven. These are a few common scenarios which are seen on ultrasound. First is a cyst, which gives the anechoic pattern, oval or round shape with a circumscribed margin, horizontal orientation that is parallel to the skin. Posterior enhancement is seen in the cyst and there are no calcifications. Fibroadenoma, it is hypoechoic usually, most commonly oval or round, less frequent lobulated borders. Circumscribed margin is usually seen, horizontally oriented in vast majority of fibroadenomas. Sometimes a minimal posterior enhancement can be seen. It may have gross calcifications. This will be dealt with subsequently. The third scenario is the cancerous lesion or the highly suspicious lesion. You have most often it will be hypoechoic. Most common is irregular in shape, less frequently round or oval. Margin may not be circumscribed. Then you use one of these descriptor terms for that. Vertically oriented many a time. Frequently posterior shadowing is seen. May have small microcalcification. Glandular tissue sometimes can resemble a lesion. It will be generally hyperechoic and other descriptors are not applicable to this. This is a cyst. You can see a typical cyst seen on the left side, which is oval, smooth, with good posterior enhancement, which is a classical feature, and no internal echoes. No other features are seen within the cyst. On the right side, you can see some internal echoes because of an infection in the cyst. Fibroadenomas are actually adenomatous solid lesions. Most common solid lesions seen in the breast. Some families have multiple fibroadenomas. They generally have smooth borders, no surrounding changes, no intralesional vascularity, no calcification unless they have undergone involution. They are actually an aberration in the development. So a group of disorders termed aberration of normal development and involution include the fibroadenoma, the sclerosing adenosis. After involution, it can be the cyst or it can be other certain pathologies, which are all benign. They all refer to benign pathologies of the breast. The first picture shows a typical fibroadenoma, which is well outlined, hypoechoic, thin border, and no other features in the surrounding regions. The bottom picture shows a much larger fibroadenoma, which is slightly inhomogeneous, has tiny cleft-like spaces within. Fibroadenomas respond to estrogen and progesterone secretion. Fibroadenomas can have multiple varieties of calcification within. On the left, you have large chunky calcification, which could give dense shadowing. It can be seen as popcorn calcification on the mammogram film also. When they undergo further involution, the soft tissue part of the lesion sometimes is not visible at all, so you just see the calcific focus. On the right, you are getting a fairly moderate-sized fibroadenoma with multiple macrocalcific foci within. Other common features that you see in the breast on examination are ducts. Very often in the young age group, you can see tiny ducts such as these, which are seen with or without internal echoes. On the right, you can see slightly bigger ducts, which may be up to 3 millimeters in size. Masses can be of different varieties. You can generally see them as hypoechoic solid lesions with irregular borders. Some of the borders may be angular, which raises the suspicion of it being malignant. On the right, you can see a typically tall, hypoechoic solid lesion with very ill-defined or non-circumscribed borders and evidence of surrounding infiltration. If you switch on the Doppler, you can see multiple vascular signals in the whole area, which is because of an inflammatory process. The Doppler or the increase shows the increased vascularity, which often results with the inflammatory process. On the right side, you can see the use of Doppler in a highly suspicious lesion, which is hypoechoic, definitely lobulated, larger lesion with multiple foci of vascular signals within. Doppler pointers can be helpful in various scenarios. Between benign and malignant, in benign, it can be peripheral vessels of low PSV and low RI. Malignant lesions can have central and peripheral flow, which can vary in types. Peripheral flow may resemble the benign pattern. The central flow is often higher peak systolic velocity and higher RI with a high peak. Other uses of Doppler include the pseudocystic lesion with a solid element inside. If you switch on the Doppler, it will pick up the Doppler signals. Otherwise, it would have appeared almost anechoic, resembling a cyst. Some other cystic lesions with soft tissue seen within, if the soft tissue has Doppler signals, it could be a growth within the cyst wall. Otherwise, it could be just debris in the cyst following infection or hemorrhage. Lymph node vascularity also has definite differences between benign and malignant lymph nodes. If benign, it generally, even if enlarged, retains the hilum and the hilar vessels are seen. If malignant, it attains a much larger size, achieves a rounder shape, and sometimes the hilum is obliterated. But if you switch on the Doppler, you can see that there are hilar vessels entering the lymph node. Besides that, there are some penetrating vascular channels entering the node. Tumor bed on serial examination of a post-op patient, you can see if there is neovascularity developing in the tumor bed, it could be a precursor to a recurrence in the tumor bed. Response to treatment. If a very vascular lesion undergoes reduction in vascularity on serial examination, it could be because it is responding well to neoadjuvant chemotherapy. Elastography is another useful tool. There are two types, that is a strain and the shear type. The strain type is when the pressure is applied by the radiologist through the probe. It goes into the tissues and the returning waves are classified as orange to blue color spectrum, that is denoting the soft to the hard lesions. In the example, you can see the definitely dark blue variety signal in the center outlining the tumor. The shear elastography is when the impulse is sent in by the machine itself. There are two types. They are the point and the transient variety. Surrounding changes is another useful pointer we can pick up by ultrasound examinations. On the left side, we are seeing an inflammatory changes in the breast, that is diffuse increase in echogenicity and ill-defined differentiation of the different types of tissues, some ductal prominence. All this could be because of mastitis. On the right side, you can see a tall hypoechoic solid lesion with definite infiltration of the surrounding tissues, denoting malignancy. Scar is a common scenario that we come across nowadays because of lumpectomy, wide excision, and breast conservation surgeries, which is being done. It is definitely a hypoechoic area which leads deep to the skin scar. It is irregular in outline. There is definite posterior shadowing and very poor color uptake. If you find the skin scar, the scar tissue within the breast tissue is generally just deep to the skin scar. The ACR BIRADS 5th edition outlines certain specific special cases. They include the cysts, which can be simple, complicated, or clustered microcysts, the mass in or on the skin, foreign body including implants, lymph nodes intramammary or axillary, vascular abnormalities including AVMs, pseudoaneurysms, Mondor's disease, which is a specific scenario where there is superficial thrombophlebitis with inflammatory changes, which resembles mastitis, post-surgical fluid collections of fat necrosis. Some of these special cases I will be showing you. This is the classical cyst with a well-defined border, totally anechoic and oval in shape. On the right side, you can see the infected cyst. Skin lesions, which include the sebaceous cyst, are seen close to and attached to the skin. It is immediately deep to and involving part of the skin. On the right side, you can see the lymph node with the hilar vessels. Post-op collections can be having the retracting clot as seen on the right side and totally anechoic in long-standing post-op collections like a seroma on the left side. Implants. Implants are very well imaged by ultrasound. You can see a triple layer pattern of the wall. That is because of the fibrous capsule and the elastomer shell. The layer 1 to 2 is the thickness of the fibrous capsule and layer 2 to 3 is the thickness of the elastomer shell. On the left, you can see the nipple of the implant, which is a common finding because that is the region where it is filled. Saline and silicone implants are the two most common ones. Saline is rarely used now. In the silicone, you can see the two capsules, the two shells that I described. They can undergo complications such as extracapsular and intracapsular ruptures. If it is extracapsular rupture, the silicone material is escaped into the surrounding breast tissue, and these can migrate along with the lymphatics into the axillary region and axillary nodes. In the bottom picture, you can see the intracapsular rupture with a collapsed elastomer shell within the outer capsule. The approach to a breast case involves detailed examination of all the features using Doppler and elastography when needed, applying the ACR Birad's lexicon, arriving at the category of the lesion. The radiological diagnosis is being provided and HPE is being followed up if needed. Coming to a spectrum of cases. Case 1 is a 58-year-old postmenopausal lady with 2 children. There was no history of prior breast complaints, biopsies or surgeries, no family history of breast malignancy in close relatives. Presenting complaint was right nipple discharge into 4 days. She went to an early cancer detection center. The nipple discharge was subjected to cytology and there was no evidence of malignancy. On examination, we could see the duct dilatation in the central part of the breast immediately deep to the areola and some dilated duct extending to the sides with a soft tissue which seemed to be within the duct. Lateral to the ducts, you could see a small but tall and irregular hypoechoic solid lesion which measured about 7 to 4 millimeter. The ducts were imaged without the standoff pad and with the standoff pad. Without the standoff pad, you could see the lactiferous sinus and the dilated duct with internal echoes. When you applied the standoff pad, you could see much more number of ducts, various sizes, and you could see the soft tissue as definitely within the duct lumen. Doppler was applied, but not of much use in this case. The small solid lesion that I showed previously was definitely hard on elastography. This is a short 20-second video to show how to apply the standoff pad. In this, we apply the standoff pad, you adjust the depth and the brightness, you come to the focal area we need to concentrate on, and we see the multiple dilated ducts of various sizes from the central part, from the subareolar region. Here you can see the soft tissue filling the duct. If you look carefully, you can see the thin liquid material on either side of the soft tissue, confirming that this soft tissue is inside and distending and filling the duct. The lesion was subjected to histopathology and the report came as infiltrating ductal carcinoma. Infiltrating ductal carcinoma is the most common type of breast malignancy. It accounts for about 75 to 80% of all cases. Detailed molecular typing is done. I will be dealing with at the end of the presentation, and appropriate treatment is given. Because of that, there is vast and definite improvement in the outcome and survival rate of the breast carcinoma cases. They can range from low grade to intermediate grade to high grade ductal carcinoma. When it is low grade, these lesions tend to be solid, hypoechoic, very often parallel to the skin surface and having normal acoustic transmission. So these can be confused with benign lesions. Calcification may be seen in the outside the mass, and they could denote the invasion. Calcification is difficult to see if the hyperechoic tissues or hyperechoic glandular tissues are seen outside the lesion. Second look ultrasound also is more productive, often after MR also. Second case is a 65-year-old lady with a enlarging mass in her right breast. You could see a complex lesion, that is a cystic lesion with irregular soft tissue in the walls of the lesion. This is a companion case. It is a 45-year-old lady with a definite small nodule just deep to the areola. This lesion was, because it is so close to the skin surface, was subsequently again examined with the standoff pad. Here we could see the definite lobulations of the border of the lesion and the inhomogeneity in the lesion. Both these came as mucinous or colloid carcinomas. They are a subtype of invasive ductal carcinoma, relatively better prognosis among the invasive ductal carcinoma types. Pure type is there with hypocellular and hypocellular variants. The hypocellular pure type generally has a much better prognosis. The mixed type involves the mucinous and the IDC parts of malignancy seen in the same patient. Right side, you get the histopathology. This vast light pink or mauve color area is all of the mucin. These two came as ER/PR positive and HER2/neu negative. This is a 58-year-old lady who developed this lump in her right breast. She had noticed since 4 months and then only came to the hospital. She was delayed because her daughter came for delivery. Now, this is a common scenario in the Indian family setup. On the mammography, you could see a well-defined nodular lesion just deep to the areola, and there was thickening of the areola and intratraction of the nipple. Ultrasound showed a definite, tall, hypoechoic solid lesion with irregular borders. Histopathology came out as papillary carcinoma with invasion. It is a rarer type of malignancy. It comes under the infiltrating ductal carcinoma. Ultrasound usually shows a lobulated solid lesion, as in our case, or rarely it can be a complex cystic lesion with mural nodularity. In the histopathology section, I am showing an intracystic papillary carcinoma. Spectrum of papillary lesions include ductal papilloma, atypical DCIS in the papilloma, micropapillary DCIS, and papillary carcinoma. Case 5 is a 34-year-old pregnant lady with 30 weeks gestation, lump in the lower part of the left breast since 3 weeks. Ultrasound showed a large, irregular, solid lesion. Microcalcific foci was seen within. There was increased vascularity too. Ultrasound shows a large, hypoechoic solid lesion spreading over a large area of the lower inner quadrant of her breast. HPE came as multifocal lobular carcinoma, ER/PR negative and HER2/neu negative. Now, lobular carcinoma is the other most common variety of breast malignancies. It is 15 to 20% of breast cancers. Multifocal and bilateral carcinomas are more seen in lobular variety. There is luminal B and triple negative varieties which give poorer prognosis. Both these types are more often seen in lobular. Metastasis to unusual sites such as peritoneum, retroperitoneum, urogenital system, and leptomeninges are commonly seen in multilobular carcinoma, lobular carcinoma more often than ductal carcinoma. In the histopathology slide, I am showing these cord-like malignant cells, which is typical of lobular carcinoma. This is a case of a 30-year-old mother of 2. She was lactating since 9 months, and her lump had a lump in her upper inner quadrant of the right breast. There was no nipple discharge, no lump in the opposite breast, no prior breast complaints, and no relevant family history. It showed a definitely very tall, very irregular, hypoechoic solid lesion. Some small microcalcific foci were also seen within the lesion. Doppler showed increased vascularity within the lesion. Elastography definitely showed the hard areas within the lesion. You could see the roughly this same shape being outlined by the dark blue color in the map. Hormonal changes in pregnancy and lactation. Both these cases, that is a pregnant one and the lactating patient, these patients will have increasing estrogen and progesterone throughout pregnancy. In the later part of pregnancy, there will be an increase in prolactin. Prolactin increase will last in the first few weeks following childbirth, but milk production is by action of prolactin, but only when it is unopposed by the action of the placental hormones. Sustenance of lactation thereby is by the event of nursing, which gives to intermittent surges of prolactin and not by continuously elevated prolactin. So pregnancy-associated breast cancer or PABC involves around 3%, constitutes around 3% of all breast malignancy cases. They are generally late to present because of the large size of the breast and difficulty to see the lesion. They are generally more likely to be ER/PR negative and HER2 positive. Triple negative variety also constitutes around 30% of these cancers, more likely to be multicentric. Mammogram can be done if needed with shielding, and only 0.4 millirad of radiation is given to the patient. This shows the pregnancy-associated breast cancer with the lactational changes being these white spaces within. The other common lesions seen in this group includes galactosele fibroadenoma, lactating adenoma, involuting fibroadenoma, bloody nipple discharge, mastitis, and abscess. Galactosele is by far the most common lesion seen in pregnant and lactating patients. This occurs because of obstruction of one or more ducts, with result in inspission of milk and other secretions within the breast, and thereby the inflammatory reactions which give rise to the lesion. They can range from a small nodular 1 centimeter lesion to a much larger lesion and can resemble solid lesions on ultrasound also. But they can have moving contents. Sometimes the galactosele undergoes secondary infection and can then only present. Case 8 is a large solid lesion in a 38-year-old lady. This patient had observed this lesion since around 3 to 4 years, but it was fairly small. In the last few months, there was rapid increase in size. You can see I have used the curvilinear probe here because the footprint of a linear probe is generally only 4 centimeter, and this lesion was too big for that. So I used the curvilinear probe, and this lesion turned out to be between 8 and 9 centimeter in 2 dimensions. It was a large hypoechoic solid lesion with definite lobulated borders, and there were some cystic spaces within. It was subjected to Doppler study. There was a low peak systolic velocity RI of 0.5. True cut biopsy under ultrasound guidance was done. Histopathology revealed the phylloids. Phylloids, the term phylloids comes from phylum means leaf. So you have these cystic spaces with the leaf-like projections into the cystic spaces. This is a histopathology slide. Differentiation between fibroadenomas and phylloids have to be done very often. Fibroadenomas are generally smaller and larger. The phylloids will be larger. Fibroadenomas will be usually hypoechoic. Phylloids can be heterogeneous. Fibroadenomas are well circumscribed, while phylloids can be microlobulated. Oval or shape is far more common in fibroadenomas. Very rarely it is irregular, more likely to be irregular in phylloids. Posterior enhancement is seen less often in fibroadenoma and more often in phylloids. Hypovascularity is more common than case in fibroadenomas. Phylloids can be hypervascular. Calcification can be uniform, much more often in fibroadenoma and very rarely amorphous. Phylloids is likely to have amorphous type of calcification. Septae can be seen in a fibroadenoma. Phylloids generally have no septae. Internal cystic spaces can be seen in the phylloids, but not often seen in the fibroadenoma. Surrounding features, including architectural distortion, edema, and duct ectasia, are more likely to be seen in a phylloids. Case 8, is a 56-year-old mother of two with a painless lump in her right breast since 2 months. There was no nipple discharge, no relevant family history, no prior breast imaging or biopsies, and no comorbid medical conditions. Ultrasound image. Sorry for the poor quality of these images. I had some difficulty in retrieving these images from the patient. It was a very tall, hypoechoic, irregular, solid lesion with some shadowing. The mammography images of this patient showed asymmetrical density in the posterior part of the breast on both CC and MLO view. There was no distinct mass lesion. Histopathology revealed foci of intermediate to high-grade DCIS extensively in the breast, along with dense periductal, intralobular, and perilobular lymphocytic infiltrates. Ductal epithelial hyperplasia was also seen. This is the picture of the lymphocytic infiltration in the patient. Same patient, after 4 years, developed DCIS in the contralateral breast, and that was also extensive. So she underwent MRM in that breast also. Both were triple positive on IHC. Now, what is lymphocytic mastitis or diabetic mastopathy is the other name. It's also called the sclerosing lymphocytic lobulopathy. It is a rare cause of breast lesion. It is usually seen in insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus patient, very often long-standing diabetes mellitus and poorly controlled. Autoimmune etiology is also attributed to this pathology. It generally gives an ill-defined mass or an area of asymmetrical density. Usually on ultrasound, it will give an irregular hypoechoic mass with shadowing. DD of breast cancer and granulomatous mastitis have to be kept in mind. Case 9 is a 38-year-old lady with an increasing size and a tender, firm swelling in her right breast. On examination, we could see there was diffuse increased echo pattern in the breast tissues, ill-defined outlines between the different type of tissues, and some ductal dilatation. This was a case of mastitis. You could see some of the ducts having internal echoes and some of the larger ducts even having some debris within. Other types of mastitis is granulomatous mastitis. This patient had a large hypoechoic lesion, which was spread over a fairly large area with finger-like projections into the surrounding breast tissue, and there was increased echo pattern of the surrounding tissue. Now, the group of mastitis has different pathologies and etiologies. Most common is infectious mastitis, commonly seen in pregnancy and lactation, and immune-suppressed states. Other types of mastitis include idiopathic granulomatous mastitis, as I showed you in this example. Then inflammatory cancers can be the important DD, which can resemble mastitis on imaging. Tuberculous mastitis is also seen. If you incise for drainage, they can result in a non-healing wound. Diabetic mastopathy or lymphocytic mastitis is the other type that is also seen. Rarely, you can get breast involvement or mastitis-like presentation in sarcoidosis and vaginas. The present name of vaginas is granulomatosis with polyangiitis. No discussion about ultrasound of the breast is complete without dealing with the male breast. The male breast resembles the female breast in the early years, and after the puberty, there is a testosterone surge and involution of all the lobular elements in the breast. Most of the ductal elements also will undergo involution, but a few ductal elements will remain. The vast majority of the breast tissue will subsequently be composed of stromal elements. This was a 63-year-old male patient who came with a nodular swelling in his right breast. On ultrasound, we could see a definite hypoechoic nodule just deep to the nipple. It was around 1.8 into 1.3 centimeter. The most common pathology in the male breast is gynecomastia, which included the nodular, dendritic, and the diffuse variety. The nodular variety is the image that I showed you before. The dendritic variety has a slightly larger area of hypoechoic tissue and finger-like projections extending into the surrounding breast. Diffuse variety means there is a much larger area of the breast being involved, very commonly resembling a female breast on examination by ultrasound. The remnant ductal elements in the male breast can rarely give rise to an intraductal papilloma. Most of the other lesions that present in the male breast are from stromal origin, including the lipoma, the spindle cell neoplasm, angiolipoma, and schwannoma. Non-neoplastic lesions include lymph node epidermal inclusion cyst, diabetic mastopathy, hematoma, fat necrosis, PASH or pseudoangiomatous stromal hyperplasia, and pseudogynecomastia. Risk factors of breast cancer. Our main aim in examining the breast with the ultrasound or other imaging modalities is to pick up breast cancers very early, in the very early stage, and to not miss a breast cancer so that the best treatment and best outcome is awarded to the patient. Being a female is the major risk factor for the breast cancer. Subsequently, increasing age, advancing age also increases the risk. Family history, especially in first-degree relatives, including the mother, sister, or the daughter. Early menarche, late age at childbirth, nulliparity, and late menopause are other causes or risk factors. Pre-malignant conditions include the atypical ductal hyperplasia, atypical lobular hyperplasia, and the lobular carcinoma in situ. The genetic factors include BRCA1 and BRCA2. Hormonal intake, alcohol, and radiation exposure are other risk factors. The pathological types, as I have been mentioning along my talk, include 75 to 80% being composed of invasive ductal carcinoma. Of these, the special types, the colloid or the mucinous, the tubular, medullary, micropapillary, and the papillary. Of these, the colloid and the mucinous and the tubular generally have a better prognosis than the other types. If none of these specific types are seen in the ductal carcinoma, it is written as ductal, not otherwise specified, or NOS. 15 to 20% of all breast cancers will be the invasive lobular type. Non-epithelial malignancies include the sarcoma, malignant phylloids, metastasis, and the lymphoma. Molecular typing. Detailed molecular typing of every case of breast cancer is done for the past few years and has greatly improved the outcome of the patients because of specific treatment. The estrogen receptor, the progesterone receptor, and the HER2 or the human epidermal growth factor receptor are measured. Molecular subtypes are thereby attributed to each and every case. They include the luminal A, luminal B, the non-luminal, and the basal. Luminal A is ER/PR positive and HER2 negative, and with a low mitotic index, that is Ki67 is less than 14%. Luminal B is ER/PR positive with intermediate to higher grade malignancy. Ki67 is of much higher number. They have a poorer prognosis than luminal A. 30% of these cases can be HER2 positive. Non-luminal accounts for about 20% of breast malignancies. Here, there is generally HER2 positivity. And ER/PR is usually negative with mid to high grade malignancy. 30% of these patients can turn out to be ER/PR positive. Trastuzumab is the drug of choice for the non-luminal variety and gives good response. Basal or the triple negative variety, these two terms are now used commonly interchangeably. They include the high grade and the aggressive patients, and poor outcome and survival is generally the outcome in these patients. Other molecular biomarkers include the claudin, P53, the TP53, and the BCL2. Ultrasound-guided interventions. They include cystaspiration or FNACs of various types. Nowadays, FNACs are not resorted to because they yield very little material and molecular typing is not possible with that material. So ultrasound-guided true cut biopsy is performed on these patients with a full track of the needle being visualized under the ultrasound probe. Ultrasound-guided wire localization can also be done, and this includes these small lesions which are not palpable and cannot be excised alone. So under ultrasound guidance, we put in the needle, and once they reach the lesion, you push the needle till you reach the further boundary of the lesion. Subsequently, the wire is inserted. The inset shows the hooked tip of these wires. When the wire goes in and the hook tip exits from the other end of the needle, the hook will expand and get embedded in the surrounding tissue, and the needle is removed from the breast. The patient is taken to the theater, and with the guidance of the wire which is still in situ in the region, the lump is excised. This is the lumpectomy with the wire in situ. So coming to the summary, you have to take a detailed family or the background history, family history, prior breast pathologies, complaints, imaging, biopsies, any particular intake, like any particular past history of radiation, alcohol intake, hormonal tablet intake, all has to be assessed by background history. Imaging diagnosis is achieved by the ACR-BRADS ultrasound lexicon. HPE is resorted to whenever needed. Management is after that. So if the malignancy is detected, then detailed molecular typing and treatment is awarded to the patient. If it is a borderline lesion, then you give a short-term follow-up, and screening or relatives also has to be advised. All the tools, techniques, and technology in the world are nothing without the head, heart, and hands to use them wisely, kindly, and mindfully. Our main purpose is to detect every single case of breast cancer early and without fail so that the best outcome can be awarded to these patients. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for this interesting and very informative session on breast imaging. Really, it was very interesting. And I'm not medical background, but still I just listen everything very carefully. Is there any question? If you have any question or clarification with all these presentation of Dr. Anusha ma'am, you can simply put it on Q&A box. Otherwise, raise your hand, and I can connect you directly with Dr. Anusha ma'am for question. Is there any question related with this whole presentation on breast imaging? Okay, I think Ekjot Gurudatta, I'm just allowing you to talk, sir. You can simply. Your mic is on, sir. I'm just connecting you. If you have any clarification, you can simply put it on Q&A section. So I think he is not available. Sir, if like there is a problem in connection, you can simply put it on Q&A section. Even in the future, if you have any questions related with the whole presentation of any query related with breast imaging or technology, modern technology, and different disease type related with breast cancer, you can simply write to me, and we'll definitely convey a question with Dr. Anusha ma'am, and she will be happy to answer the same. So, thank you. Thank you all for joining us in Ultrasound Innovator Conference of 2 days, 18th to 19th. Really, it was very amazing and interesting conference with our keynote speakers from Dr. Raijo Matthew, Dr. ML, Dr. Matthew George, and Dr. Anusha Varghese. So first, thank you, Dr. Ramesh Shanaishar, for giving us the opportunity to be associated with CREST. And thank you so much, Mr. Ravindra Sir, Priti ma'am from BPL Medical Technology for associated as a sponsor for this session. Thank you all my crew, Microbios India crew. Thank you, Kusum.
Thank you.
My narrator. Thank you, Kushore.
Thank you, Microbios and BPL Medical Technology for the opportunity.
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. So I think it's time to go. If you have any question and clarification, you can simply put it on our emailing ID. After the session, you will get a thank you mail from Microbios India and BPL Medical Technology site. So, is there any question or clarification? You can simply raise your hand and we'll connect with you with Anusha ma'am. I think, yeah, Varsha, I'm just connecting you, ma'am. Ma'am, your audio is on now. You can connect with, you can speak to your question. You can speak, ma'am. Varsha, ma'am, you can speak. Varsha, ma'am, you can speak. Ma'am, you can directly speak to ma'am. You are connected now. Your audio is active. Varsha ma'am, are you there? You can directly speak, ma'am, from your audio. Otherwise, you can put it on a Q&A box. Okay. I think, ma'am, he's not able to connect. Ma'am, if you have any
Okay.
question, Varsha, ma'am, you can simply write to me. And we will convey your question with Dr. Anusha, and she will happy to reply it back.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So let's finish the session with a good note. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us. And we will definitely organize the third edition of Ultrasound Innovator in next year with many more upgraded sessions, upgraded product showcase from different of our sponsors and keynote speakers of the country. So Anusha ma'am, thank you for joining us today, and we'll
Thank
definitely
you.
hope to like connected with you in future too. So let's end with a good note. So thank you again, and you will get a subscription from Microbios Endosite from next 6 months. Ma'am, there is one question from Vandana.
Yeah.
Could you please tell the annual screening protocol?
Annual screening protocol.
Yeah.
Annual. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can hear me?
Yeah, ma'am, I'm here. I can hear.
Actually, in India, there is no definite guideline for annual screening. But if the patient has any family history, especially in the first degree relative, it is best to do annual screening from age of 40, or 5 years prior to the age of onset of the breast cancer in that particular relative. So if a patient has a mother who had breast cancer when she was 50, she should start screening by 40, because anyway we are starting screening from 40. But if the breast cancer in the relative started at 40, you should start screening at 35. That is 5 years before the onset of the malignancy in the first degree relative.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks for answer. Hope Vandana ma'am, you satisfied with the answer. If you have any more question or clarification, you can directly mail to me at support@microbiosindia.com. We will convey your question with ma'am, and you will get the answer. Okay, let's close up. So thank you again, Anusha ma'am, for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
So